This is notational analysis. What is biomechanics? Biomechanics is analysing the movement of an athlete during sport. This is done to help the understanding of an athlete's performance and measuring how good they were and what they need to improve on. This can then help them improve their individual performance. It can also help with less of an injury risk to the players. An example of this would be someone recording everything a footballer does in a game so that they can look back what they did well and what they need to improve on. What is notational analysis? Notational analysis is the study of a performer's movement patterns, tactics, and how they perform. This is then recorded in quantitative data. Notational analysis started off as someone watching and recording at the game. This then meant that people would miss things out and the data wouldn't be accurate. Because of this, they then started to record the games on cameras and analyse them afterwards from the footage. Analysing data is now done all on computers and is a lot more accurate as they are able to look back over what they have watched as many times as they want. It is done to help the coaches see who is playing well and for the opposition to see who is playing well so that they can have a game plan for them. There are three different types of analyze: technical, tactical, and movement. Technical analyzing is on certain technical parts to a player's game, whether they succeed or fail in attempting it. Coaches can then use this to see if their players are in the right position and are playing well. An example of this would be a coach recording how many successful passes a centre in netball completed to see whether they are suited to the right position, as a centre has to do passing and not shooting. It is normally recorded with quantitative data and the final answer in either percentages or frequency. The second way is tactical. This is where a team has a certain tactic for a certain play of theirs that is suited to their players that they have. These tactics can be varied at different levels from basic to extreme. As a team, you need to have multiple tactics so the other team can't tell what you're going to do, and when playing as a team you should try recognise when they perform their tactics. An example would be in football when a team has different corner tactics for their games. The last one is movement. This is where someone records the movement of a player in sport, for example recording the distance covered in basketball players. This then means that the coach can look at what players have better fitness levels than others, which allows them to train their fitness and movement patterns in the game to help them out in their position. This then sets the standard for the certain position which the coaches can have guidance for. For example, a basketball team recording each player and comparing them to other players in the league that play in the same position to see if they are up to their standard. The performance indicators can vary depending on the position. A small forward is someone who is more agile, leaner and the smaller out of the two forwards. The role of a small forward in basketball is to be an all-rounder. They need to be able to play like a power forward and a centre, but also be able to guard as well when needed. They aren't normally the tallest in the team, as the centre is normally taller, but the guards are normally smaller than them, so they will have to challenge for rebounds as well. Here is my 5 performance indicators. A two-pointer is a shot from inside the area that goes into the basket. This can be taken from anywhere in the area and can be shot in many different ways. A three-pointer is a shot that is taken from outside of the semicircle and that also goes into the basket, whether that's off the backboard or straight in. If the player's foot is on the line, it doesn't count as a three-pointer and counts as a two-pointer. A steal is when a defender legally gains possession of the ball off an opponent without fouling them. From this they then turn defence into attack for their team and stops the opposition from scoring. A defensive rebound is when a player is the first person to the ball after one of the opposition has had a shot and hit either the backboard or the hoop ring, but did not go in. A layup is where a player has possession of the ball and goes right up underneath the hoop and jumps up to the hoop and shoots with it hitting against the backboard before going in. There are two ways of notational analysis methods. One way of recording data from a game is to do it live. This is done by sitting and watching the game and recording everything that a certain player or team does. This way is unreliable as you may miss some bits of information. That is why people nowadays video the game and record the data of the video afterwards. This is better as you are able to watch back in case you missed anything, and then you won't miss out any important data that is needed. How effective is notational analysis? There are positives and negatives to notational analysis. One positive of notational analysis is that it allows performers to recognize areas of weakness to their game so that they can improve them in their own time. For example, if a basketball player recognizes that they missed more layups than they scored, they can then work on their layups in training. Another positive is it can help the coach out with picking squad to see who's in form, which will make it a lot easier for them. It also allows performers to set goals for their weaknesses and to recognize everything that is done during the game and not just noticeable moments. For example, in rugby, you don't just notice the players that score the tries. Despite this, there are also negatives to notational analysis. One being that a coach can't analyze live as can miss important moments which can make the data unreliable and can lead to the player being misleaded. For example, if a player was told they scored 2 out of 3 shots in netball but the recorder missed 2 shots that they had actually missed, this would then make the player believe that their shooting was a lot better than it actually was. Another negative would be that new software to help analyze is also very expensive now. As a coach, you need to record all of your players in a team sport, so therefore you can't compare your players' performance as it's too hard to record every player's at the game. Here we have 5 graphs comparing 2 players' results. The results in the green as shown above is James's results, and the results in red is Rudy's results. In figure 1 we can see that James scored over the double amount of 2-pointers and missed less shots than Rudy as well. In figure 4 we have the same outcome for 3-pointers where James scored more and missed less than Rudy. In figure 3 it's the same outcome, but this time they missed the same amount of layups. We can also see in figure 2 that James has performed more successful steals than Rudy. The same goes for figure 5 where we can see that James is more successful with defensive rebounds. This data shows us that James overall had a better game than Rudy and performed better at my 5 performance criteria that I chose. Here we have 2 schematics of different people's distance covered in our basketball matches that we recorded. The schematic is a visual image of the distance covered and the movement of a player on a pitch in a game. Our game was basketball. The schematic on the left, the distance covered is 1,900 meters, and the one on the right is 2,300 meters. So we can tell by this the athlete on the right covered more distance. The difference between the two is that the one on the right, they covered the whole pitch for the same amount, but the schematic on the left is mostly covering one half of the pitch on the left side. This is because they would have been one of the more attacking players of the team and not done as much defending as others. Therefore, they did not cover as much distance as they weren't getting back to defend. It can also be that their team was attacking more so that they didn't have to defend. This then makes it hard to compare the distance covered as the 2 players were on opposite teams, so one team could have had the ball more, so they would have been attacking more. So then one of the players would have had to have got back to defending more. So it's hard to tell what player covered more distance for their position in their team. Here we have 2 comparisons from the data we collected from our basketball match. Our first comparison is to see whether someone's height can make a difference in the amount of defensive rebounds that they achieve. We can see from this graph that there is no correlation between these. This tells us that the height of the player doesn't affect the amount of defensive rebounds that they succeed. However, we can see from this graph that there were more defensive rebounds from the players that were taller. So there we can say that their height does affect it a bit, but doesn't completely affect it, as smaller players also were able to get more defensive rebounds than players that were taller than them. Despite this, the data only tells us how many defensive rebounds were successful, as it doesn't tell us how many were attempted. This means that there still could be a chance that height does matter, but this graph just doesn't represent that. Our second graph that we have here is defensive rebounds versus offensive rebounds on the right. A defensive rebound is when getting the ball after the opposition have had a shot and missed the shot but hit the backboard or the rim, and you're the first person to get the ball without it going out of play or to another player. An offensive rebound is doing the same but performing it when a teammate shoots and misses the opposition's hoop. From this data we can see that there were more defensive rebounds than offensive rebounds. This shows us that the teams probably would have tried harder when defending than attacking. We also can't tell what team got more rebounds, as it could be that one team got more defensive rebounds as they were always defending, but were better at rebounding in general.